Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a chilling collection of ghost and paranormal stories for you to enjoy. If you'd like even more content and a birthday shout out, feel free to check out the link to Patreon. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. There was a kid I became friends with in middle school. We were both kind of odd ones out, both did theatre, and read a lot and didn't have many friends. I'll call him Charlie. There was one time Charlie came over to my house. I'm going to try really hard to do this justice because it sends chills down my spine whenever I remember it. My sister had recently thrown a Halloween party in our basement. There were still black lights instead of regular light bulbs throughout the area. We were hanging out down there and I wish I remembered more of this conversation, but long story short, Charlie was being very odd, saying things I didn't really know how to respond that were dark and intense. He talked about having some sort of dark presence and being possessed. I think he could tell I didn't really believe him and told me he could prove it. Above us were 2 rows of 3 lights. He pointed to the first row center light. "That light's going to go out," he said, and laughed and waited. After about 30 seconds had passed, I started to say something, and as soon as I did, not only did the light go out, but it popped so loudly I genuinely jumped. My breath catches and I stare at him. He has this unexplainable look in his eyes. His eyes were naturally a dark brown, but they looked black. It was just so intense and unnerving. He did other things during this hangout, such as insult me, playing a lead role in a play at our local theatre, which wasn't typical like him. I didn't really know what to do. He was always around at school, so I just kind of played it off. We played video games and I did my best to move on. A few weeks later, it was my birthday, and Charlie had been invited over a month ago along with 2 girlfriends of mine, Lana and Chloe. We all met at my house and decided to walk to the downtown area, not even a mile from my home. There was a small path in a heavily wooded area that served as a shortcut. As we were walking, Charlie began talking about graves and death. Chloe, Lana and I all kind of looked at each other uneasily. I don't remember exactly what Charlie was saying, but it was some genuine, wholehearted tirade about how he was the Prince of Death, and it was part of him, or something along those lines. I don't remember what else he said, but he ranted for so long that they became more of growls of a deep and intense nature and a booming voice. When suddenly, without provocation, he launched for Lana's neck. He locked on and was full on choking her with all of his strength. I'm not proud of this, but as soon as I saw Lana hit him and get him off her, I just ran. Lana, Chloe and I all lived in the same neighborhood just a few doors down from each other, and we sprinted at full speed and didn't dare look back. I didn't really know what I was thinking, but we all decided to split up. So I slammed my door and sat in my room, terrified and not knowing what to do. My parents weren't home, and I sat there for what felt like hours. The police knocked on our door. My older sister answered it. She came upstairs horrified, asking why the police said Charlie had knocked on a neighbor's door with no shirt, no phone, and missing a shoe and banged up. I was horrified. I knew for a fact when we had left he still had his phone, shirt, and shoes. A while later, my parents got home and the police came back to question me. I told them everything, and they claimed the other girls had told them a different story. I have no idea why they would do that, and insisted I didn't have anything else to tell them. Apparently Charlie had been in and out of psych wards, something I had no idea of, and they had recently adjusted his medication. Nothing further came out of that situation with the police, and I didn't see Charlie at school for at least a full year after that. Obviously, the kid has mental issues by society's standards, but nothing will ever be able to explain how the light went out, and it will forever leave me unsettled. I've been keeping track of strange things that happen in my house, writing them down as I go. And now, looking back, I realized how much has happened here, and how it always seems to circle back to the same hallway. For context, I've always been empathetic, and I've struggled a lot with my mental health. I once heard that poor mental health can act like an open door to spirits, but I don't know if that's true, but sometimes it feels that way. The house itself isn't old. It was built in the 1960s, but something about it doesn't feel right. It started small. A couple of times when I was alone in the living room, I was suddenly hit with this overwhelming scent, like an old house or maybe an older woman's perfume. The smell came and went in seconds with no explanation. The next thing that happened was darker. One night I was at my lowest point, crying on the bathroom floor, seriously thinking about taking my own life. That's when I heard something brush against the bathroom door. It sounded exactly like when my dog rubs against the wood. But he wasn't supposed to be out. He's always kept in his kennel, when no one's with him. I pulled myself together and went to check. Sure enough, he was fast asleep, locked in his kennel, and that shook me. At the time, I thought maybe something, or some spirit, was trying to stop me, to keep me alive. But the next encounters didn't feel protective. One evening, I was in the living room scrolling on my phone, when I suddenly felt it. That heavy sense that someone else has entered the room. I looked up towards the hallway. It was almost pitch black, but I swear I saw something at the end of it. A figure half hidden behind the wall, blurry and indistinct. Only there for a second. But the feeling it left me with wasn't curiosity but dread. A gut-deep certainty that this thing is not here to help me. Not long after that, my mum and stepdad swore they heard me call for them. I hadn't. I was in my room, headphones off, not saying a word. Another time, my stepdad casually mentioned that he'd seen me sleepwalking. But I knew that was impossible. My door was still locked from the inside when I woke up, my headphones still perfectly in place. If he saw something moving around that night, it wasn't me. Things escalated when I moved bedrooms. In late 2024, one of my brothers moved out, and I took his old room, right off that same hallway. Almost immediately, I began having violent dreams. Always the same theme. Someone taking my life, always by a man. The worst one was when they used a knife repeatedly. Usually I can jolt myself awake in dreams, but not this time. I couldn't wake up until it was over. And the scariest part, I felt it not sharp stabbing pains, but cramps, twisting sensations, and when I woke up, I could still feel a faint tingling, exactly where it happened in the dream. Recently, I started practicing witchcraft. I set up protection sigils, made jars with salt, bay leaves, and herbs, sprinkled rosemary around my room. I thought it might help. Instead, things started moving. One morning, I found a bottle of hair product on the floor. I'd been at my desk, right next to it before bed. I hadn't touched it. Later that same day, I came home from school and found chaos on my desk. A basket that had been on the top shelf was somehow placed neatly on my desk, turned at a different angle. But all its contents were scattered across the floor and chair. Other objects had fallen in different directions, like they'd been thrown, not dropped. It didn't make sense. That's when I started to worry about the protection that might have made whatever this is angry. And then I found out I wasn't the only one who'd seen it. My brother's girlfriend told me one night while lying on the couch in the living room, she saw a shadow figure in the hallway. She described it perfectly, peeking from the corner, hands gripping the walls, head tilted around, exactly where I had seen mine. Since then, paranoia had taken root. I can't sit at my desk with my back to the room anymore. I moved it so my back is against the wall. I even got rid of my bed frame because the feeling that something was hiding under it got too strong to ignore. Sometimes it's just a shadow in the corner of my eye. Sometimes it's that heavy, pressing dread. And sometimes it feels like it's standing right there waiting. For now, things have been quiet. But quiet doesn't mean gone. And when I sit up in my room, I can't shake the feeling that it's still here. Back in 19, when my friends and I were 13 years old, we had a small, tight-knit friend group that expanded when we welcomed a new student so that she wouldn't feel left out. The group included me, my childhood best friend who was already showing signs of toxic behavior, a longtime close friend, a skeptical classmate, and the new girl who was going through a tough time. This background sets the stage for the strange experiences we were about to have. The story starts in the summer of 2019, when my ex-best friend Susan and the friend I'd known since first grade, Tabitha, were having a sleepover at Susan's house. At that point, the three of us were all somewhat interested in witchcraft, each in our own way, though I was probably the most invested. We talked a lot about the paranormal and anything remotely witchy. So one night during the sleepover, Susan and Tabitha got bored and decided to leave the house in the middle of the night. They only walked down to an abandoned house at the end of Susan's street, but didn't go inside, because before they even had a chance to, they saw a strange, shadowy figure standing behind a corner. It really scared them and they ran home. They said they felt like someone was watching them from the moment they left Susan's house. When they told me about it later, I assumed maybe it was just a person, but they were adamant that it didn't look human. Later on, we'd have more encounters, especially in that same street even during the day. All three of us would see shadowy figures like we were being watched, no matter where we were, and there was always this heavy, unsettling energy around us. Admittedly, we did try to communicate in small ways. We were young and curious and just baby witches at the time. We never got any clear answers, just more and more frequent experiences. It's also important to mention that Tabitha and I lived on the other side of town, while Susan and the new girl both lived on the street where all of this happened, and it definitely happened more intensely there. That said, we still experienced weird things even in other places. The encounters were always similar: shadowy figures, a sudden wave of fear or sadness, or the feeling of being followed. After months of this, we decided that maybe if we just ignored it, it would go away. And after a few more months, it actually did. No more footsteps behind us, no more figures watching us from windows, corners, or those creepy glints of eyes in the dark. The group fell apart less than a year later, and some of us still don't talk to this day. I'm not really sure what the shadow figure was, but the last time I really thought about it was when I was 15 and talking to Tabitha. We kind of agreed that whatever it might have been was feeding off the negative energy from Susan and the new girl, both of whom were being really toxic at the time and constantly making the rest of us feel awful. The worse the group dynamic got, the more intense the experience became. I wanted to share this to see if anyone has a different take on what all of this could have meant, or what exactly it was that was watching us. When I was around 6 or 7, something happened to me that I've never forgotten. To this day, I can still see it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I've always had a very strong memory, even as a little kid. I could recall days and moments in perfect detail and still can. That's why I know what I experienced wasn't just some childish imagination or a false memory. At the time, my family was going through one of the hardest periods of our lives. My baby sister had just been born, but from the very beginning, she was very sick. She spent the first months of her life in the hospital, hooked up to machines and fighting for every breath. My mum was there with her almost the entire time, exhausted and terrified. The doctors eventually told us there wasn't much more they could do. She had a weak, struggling heart, and it didn't look like she was going to make it. After that, Mum brought her home, and I remember the heaviness in the house. Even as a kid, I could feel the fear and grief that was hanging in the air. Like no one wanted to say the words aloud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. We were going to lose her at any moment. The day this happened, my mum had turned on the prayer channel in the living room. She told me and my older sister to come sit with her to pray for the baby together. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember her voice trembling. She was desperate, but she was also firm, like she was reaching out to something beyond us with everything she had left. I sat there, a little kid, doing the best I could to follow along. When we were finished, my mum went into the bedroom with my two sisters, the newborn and my older one, to rest. I stayed in the kitchen. From where I was sitting, I had a clear view down the hallway. Both bedroom doors were side by side at the end. And that was when I saw it. The empty room had its door wide open. I remember glancing up towards it and catching sight of something moving. At first, I thought it was my mum, but then I realized it could not be. What I saw wasn't a person. It was the corner of something white, like a flowing robe, just the bottom part of it slowly gliding into the room. There was no sound, no footsteps, just that flash of white fabric vanishing inside. I froze. I didn't fear exactly. It wasn't like the usual scary things kid imagine, monsters in the closet or shadows at night. Instead, it felt strange and serious, like I was witnessing something I wasn't supposed to interrupt. But I can still remember holding my breath, staring at that doorway and waiting for someone or something to come back out. But nothing did. I sat there for a while, not moving, not calling for my mum, even though I didn't fully understand what I had seen. I knew it wasn't ordinary. What happened next is what made the whole experience unforgettable. Not long after that day, my baby sister started getting better, slowly at first, but steadily. The same doctors who had practically sent her home to die couldn't explain how she was suddenly gaining strength. Her heart seemed to stabilize, and the struggle she had been born into lifted. Mum called it a miracle, and in my young mind I couldn't help but connect it to what I'd seen. The white robe disappearing into the room right after we'd prayed. I've thought about it so many times since then. Was it an angel? A ghost? Some ancestor watching over us? I don't know. But part of me has always believed that whatever it was, it helped my sister survive. Now that I'm older, I can still picture every detail of that hallway, the open door, the slow movement of white fabric. It's not a blurry childhood dream. It's one of the clearest memories I have. And because of that, I'll always believe I saw something real. I'll never know what it was exactly, but what I do know is this: my sister is alive today. And sometimes when I think back on that night, I wonder if I actually witnessed a miracle happening right in front of me. I'm an 18-year-old male and work at a theme park that I won't disclose the name of. But I saw something and want you guys' thoughts. I've never been a firm believer in ghosts and things. However, I may have changed my view now. One night a few weeks ago, we were locking up the scare mazes that the park opened for their Halloween event. Now, 2 of these mazes are located in a fairly old historic building, one in the basement and one at the very top. We were closing up the first maze in the basement as usual, going through to make sure everyone was out. There is one part of the maze where you walk through lots of shelves with jars on. Now in scare mazes, the actors run through things called rat runs, which help us get better scares, like shortcuts through the maze layout. I went into the rat run located by these shelves, and I thought I heard someone, so I went in to check and saw a little boy in really old medieval clothing. I asked if he was okay and he ran off. I couldn't find him. He wasn't even pale or transparent, just an ordinary looking boy. I put this all down to me seeing things and carried on through the rest of the maze. But the next part is what I can't explain. Once we closed the first maze, we went up the stairs to the second one and began walking through it. I honestly can't tell you how this happened, but there's something you should know beforehand. The maze is huge and takes about 15 minutes to walk through. There are no hidden rooms apart from the rat runs, as it's on the top floor, and if we went beyond the walls we'd be falling to our deaths. So with that, me and my group were walking through when everything went dark. I don't know when or how, but I found myself in a completely dark, silent room, not too cold or too hot, like the perfect balance between all my senses. I assumed I'd wandered into a rat run, so I took about 3 steps before I saw a line of light like a crack in the wall. I went about 4 steps and stepped through. I was back in the maze. I had exited by the doll's house, and here's the thing. The doll's house was at the other end of the maze. I was very confused, but when I turned back, the gap in the wall had gone. About 10 minutes later, my ground came round the corner and asked where I'd been. I told them what had happened, but obviously the gap had gone. Seriously though, what happened was physically impossible. How did I walk 10 to 15 minutes in 3 steps to the other side of the maze? This is what has made me share this. Do any of you guys know? Does it sound familiar? Am I going crazy? Please, I need answers. I'm 37 and was born in Poland and moved to England in 2011. In my adult life, I look for logical reasons and explanations for everything. It keeps me safe and sane. It's because at a certain point in my teenage life, I had to start telling myself that things that happened weren't real, and eventually they stopped. But still, whenever there is any mention of the paranormal, a fear so great takes over. It's embarrassing. It's not logical or reasonable to me, but I immediately get goosebumps. Since my earliest memories, I've experienced darkness. Until my early teenage years, I had dreams of drowning in oily darkness, of war, burning cities, and people dying. I had dreams of shadows in the forest, demons luring me. My parents had a hard time because they would find me out of bed hiding in a different room, crying on the floor while asleep. My very first confusing experience was when I was maybe 7, and the older kids took me to the basement where they tried a ghost invocation using glass tied to a string. I only remember that they asked some questions and the glass exploded, and we ran in fear. Months later, I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and I felt frozen in bed. I had my cover over my head and I saw 2 ghastly figures just walk through my bedroom. I was too scared to move, but eventually when I peeked out, it was morning and sunny outside. My dad had friends who were into occult stuff, and he used to take me there, me being 8 years old, telling them how incredibly smart for my age I was. I hadn't any experiences except dreams until I was a teenager, and wanted to hike in the forest around my town. It never happened when I was with someone. When I was alone, especially on a hike back there in the forest in Poland, I always felt something looking at me. The darkness between the trees suddenly became darker. If you went into the forest, or sounds would vanish. One day I remember I got brave enough. I always tried to shrug off that fear, and I ventured into the ancient forest. It was so wonderful, almost magical. But then I found myself in a dark part of the woods. I saw a random lonely staircase in the distance, and then found a clearing. There was a very big, old dead oak tree, and everything around it was quiet. The ground was dead, drained of nutrients. And I remember I stopped going on hikes alone after that. When I was 17, one of my friends, who was deeply into history and World War II, wanted me to go with him on a forest hunt with a metal detector. There was a place a fairly long hike away from our town, where at the beginning of the century there was a lake and a German restaurant. All of this area was once German before the war. There was the prison camp and the ruins of an artificial petrol plant built by the Nazis, all in ruin and cordoned off due to possible mines or undetonated bombs. I'd been to that German restaurant spot many times before with school, my dad, and on group hikes. But that day was different. My friend found some nice old china plates, coins and things, but I remember I couldn't settle. For the whole time I felt like we should hurry. I still remember it was such an odd feeling. I finally convinced my friend to just pack away and go. And as he was almost done, we both heard a very low, bass-like rumbling, like a heavy machine or drums or both. But it couldn't be a truck because the nearest road was almost 2 miles away. And I remember it was getting louder, and we both panicked and ran. When we got back the same way, and saw a few trees that had broken and collapsed, there was no wind. And we both asked each other how that could have happened, because the trees were fine and erect before. Eventually, we went out of the forest and sprinted to the nearest village, where we felt safe. But the first thing we saw were a herd of goats, and a large goat with the most diabolical horns, exactly like those you'd see on Satan. I remember we fully jogged home, 8 miles, and we never spoke of it after. From that moment, I tried very hard not to believe in anything paranormal, but I always had those chills come back, those moments of absolute anguish and fear when I was alone. That's why I moved to the UK. Here, nothing happened for a long time until recently, when I was just at the end of a very toxic relationship. At night, even with my partner, I had the feeling that something was not okay. Maybe because, although I was in a relationship, I was alone and lonely. In the last year of that relationship, a lot of things happened. Some of them just uncomfortable, others downright disturbing. It was during COVID. I had rescued a dog, and honestly, she'd been the only constant source of light in my life ever since. Always around, always watching and making me feel safer. Back then I lived near a small park, barely 100 meters from the house. Wide open with nothing but grass and a lone lamppost at the far end. When my dog was still a puppy, she had trouble holding her bladder, so I'd take her out at night after 8 or 9 for quick walks. And that's when things started. It happened 3 separate times. I'd walk into the park, leash in hand, the cold air biting at my neck, and then I'd see him. At least, I think it was a man, standing directly under the lamppost, hood up, perfectly still watching me. Every single time. It was like I walked into an invisible wall of dread. My stomach would twist, and my spine would light up like it knew something I didn't. I'd pretend not to notice, get my dog to do her business, and leave as quickly as I could. He never moved, never said a word, just observed. Then came the last time. About 3 weeks before I moved out, my ex had already left by then. It was early January of 2022. I took my dog out for her nightly walk at around 9:30, but I refused to go near the park. Instead, I took a different route along a neighborhood path well lit by streetlights and porch lamps. Houses lined both sides. It should have felt safe, but that night everything felt wrong. There was this heavy fog that was clinging to everything. It bounced the light around, making the whole street and glow a soft, unnatural red. No cars passed and no one walked by. Not even dogs barking from the backyards, just this silence. And then it happened. We were maybe halfway down the block when this awful, high-pitched screech sound ripped through the fog, like metal being shredded, or something alive being pulled apart. I can't explain it, and I've never heard anything like it before or since. My dog, who doesn't flinch at fireworks or sirens, lost it. She bolted so hard I nearly dislocated my shoulder trying to keep up. She tore back to the house like her life depended on it, and I did the same. Even after we got inside and locked the door, nothing felt okay. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't calm down. The house didn't feel safe. I stayed up for hours, pacing, listening, waiting for something I couldn't name. I only ever slept because my body gave out. I haven't told many people about this. I don't want to be labeled as paranoid or delusional. But these memories, sometimes I think I did imagine it. Maybe stress or grief twisted it in my head. But then I remember the fear. How real it felt, how my dog reacted. I'm not afraid of the night. I'm not afraid of the dark. But the thing that lurks within the darkness, that is what I'm scared of. Do you believe in ghosts or demons? I want to share with you a recent experience of mine that involves the spirit of a little girl. And I know demons can disguise themselves as children to disarm you, but I feel like she's safe. So, I've seen 2 puzzle boxes fall off the table. Both were lying flat and placed about a foot from the edge. I'll often hear her walking in the hallway or playing in the living room. A few months ago, she poked my shoulder, and I heard giggling as she ran into my parents' room. Now I have a rule. Don't go into the living room or bathroom between midnight and 3 a.m. because I feel like that's her time to roam the house. Sometimes I'll break the rule if I really need to grab something from the kitchen. I've only seen her once, when I opened my door at 12:03 a.m. She was standing in the bathroom doorway. Her eyes were dark, but there was an unknown light reflecting in them. She was about the height of the doorknob, perhaps a little taller, with ashy pale skin. I've seen other things in the house too. A figure standing in my sister's old room, shadows moving in my dad's office. My mum has heard thudding and dragging noises in her room near the back door. My second experience happened when I was 7, staying at my nana's old place. I used to see a figure out in the woods, a Cherokee man with a downwards pointed feather and a crooked nose. I'd see him running through the trees, almost like he was protecting the house. And at night, I'd hear him whooping. I told my aunt about it, and she said she'd seen me staring out into the woods watching something but could never see what it was. As my grandfather was perishing, that spirit's presence grew stronger. I had a great-great-grandfather who was a full-blooded Cherokee. He passed away long before I was born, but somehow I feel like I've met him. I believe he could have been the spirit in the woods. My family isn't a stranger to the paranormal. We've had experiences in our house, at Nana's old place, and even at my grandmother's current home. About 12 years ago, we moved to a different part of our country. It was a double-wide trailer with 16 acres of land. Soon after we moved in, I felt like I was being constantly watched. I was 13 at the time. I did have experiences in that house. Things would always fall in my bathroom across from my room. I would wake up with unknown bruises. My hair has been pulled once or twice, but nothing too serious. One night, I was laying in bed, with my feet out of the blanket because I was a little hot, as I was watching TV, just relaxing, when the blanket flips over my feet. I never touched it or moved the blanket. Again, it's not that serious. There was a room right by mine that I would have to pass any time I needed to go to the bathroom. And every time I passed that room, I just got this bad feeling. I didn't trust this room. Nothing was wrong with it. It was just a normal room, but there was something about it. I eventually got used to it, and I was no longer freaked out. Fast forward to today, and I feel it has gotten stronger, whatever it is. It messes with my husband's Xbox One and his 360. It turns them on and tries to eject the discs. I woke up with scratches around my neck and chin. There'll be times when I see a black figure from the corner of my eye, and when I turn to look, it's gone. I can feel when he's around me. I've named him Randy. I used to dabble with witchcraft, not excessively, but would use protection spells and things like that. But haven't done it in a number of years because I felt it didn't work. Could that have made it stronger? I fully believe it's the spirit from the trailer home. I've had experiences since moving, but nothing ever too serious other than that. Any advice could be appreciated. I want to start by saying I've had paranormal experiences almost my whole life. I've been spooked, but I've never really been scared. I've had things such as doors open and close, lights turn on and off, and seeing people walk by, hearing footsteps down the hall, cabinets opening and hearing voices. But that being said, I've had absolutely no idea what happened on this night or what even to call it. I'm going to give you some important background info. This incident happened in early 2023. I was 21 and living with my mum and sister. Around 2020, I got really into spiritual things like crystal, tarot, and read a ton on witchcraft, but kind of lost interest in it. My room was a safe space. I always had a feeling nothing bad or negative could get in, as I always burnt incense and stuff like that. We had 4 dogs, 2 cats, and my room was directly across from my mum's. My bed was set up against my wall under the window and accessed from my door. Also, my sister and her boyfriend have 2 dogs. One dog lived with us, while the other stayed at his place. This night, they were both there, and my sister always has the door shut at night, with their dogs in her room. My mum was over at her boyfriend's for the night, and my sister and her boyfriend slept in her room when she's not home, because it's colder in my mum's room. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. In the process of getting up, my boyfriend at the time also woke up. Down the hall was the bathroom, which always had a nightlight on. As I was walking to the bathroom, I saw our childhood dog, Barkley, just laying on the floor outside it. I reached down to pet him for a minute before going to the bathroom. As I walked out and pet him again and went back to my room. As I was walking back, I saw my mum's door was shut, so I left my door cracked in case Barkley tried to come and sleep in my room like he usually did. I got back in bed, and me and my boyfriend talked for a minute, when all of a sudden my door pushed open and my sister's boyfriend's dog, Luna, came into the room. She's an extremely energetic dog, so she jumped straight onto the bed and started jumping and licking both of us. I pushed her off and she just left the room. I leaned off the bed and pushed the door shut more, but still cracked, and you can still see a good amount of light coming from the nightlight in the bathroom. I remember us both being confused and talked about how weird it was that she wasn't locked up in my mum's room with my sister and her boyfriend, but didn't think much about it. I'm not sure what time it was, but my blinds were open, so I knew it was still dark. I was laying on my back and my boyfriend put his head on my chest facing my closet, and we were just talking. I remember looking at my door as a black shadow figure was staring right back at me. It was just an outline with no facial features at all. The way it was positioned, it looked like someone just leaning over and peeking their head into the room. But as I'm staring at this figure, I'm telling myself that it could be the cats on the bathroom counter just casting a strange shadow. And I was waiting for my boyfriend to turn his head to the door and then ask him what he thought it was, since it clearly looked like a person. I was probably staring at this thing for a solid minute when I felt my boyfriend turn his head to face the door. As soon as he turned his head, the figure backed out of view. I gasped and shoved him off me, shot straight with my back against the wall and couldn't talk. I was absolutely horrified. I was hyperventilating, so I couldn't even talk. He started freaking out, asking me what was going on and what was wrong, and I was finally able to say that someone was in the hall, and after a few minutes he went through the house and said no one was there. I was freaked out, but what was even scarier is that I had him go into the hall and recreate it. He was 6'4", so he's not short by any means. He barely reached where the figure was. This thing would have had to have been at least 7 feet to lean in the doorway and still be near the top of it. I calmed down a bit, and when I heard my sister's boyfriend alarm going off in my mum's room, I knew it was around 6 a.m. I screamed his name for him and my sister to come into my room. My door was now wide open, so when my mum's bedroom door opened, we were both confused to see Luna run into the room and jump on us for a second time. We were both looking, asking ourselves what was going on. They both came into the room, and as soon as I started telling them what happened from the beginning, my sister stopped me and asked what the hell I was talking about. Luna and Barkley have been in the room with them the whole time, apparently. I was so freaked out asking everyone if I was sleeping and pinching myself, but I was awake. I ended up falling asleep when the sun came up, and I asked my boyfriend if he remembered what happened, and he said yes, so I know I wasn't dreaming. I still have no idea what happened that night. I don't know if it was just a bunch of paranormal stuff, or something else. I moved out of my mum's in September of 23. I gave away most of my spiritual stuff to a girl who comes into my work. I now live with my childhood best friend and her boyfriend, about half hour away from my mum's, and have seen shadows 2 other times. We've had weird stuff happen still, but we just say it's her dad or grandpa, since both of their ashes are in the house. I was with a guy I was talking to, and we got into an argument, and he was hugging me in the dark on my bed, and I could see shadows bouncing around the room behind him. It could have just been my eyes, but again I pushed him off me, couldn't talk, and had this awful feeling. I saged our house the next day, and I've only ever seen one since. There was a tall shadow standing outside my doorway a few months ago, but I'm just telling myself it was my dad's friend watching over the house. I don't know what I saw any of these times, but I would love to get others' opinions. This happened just a few days ago, and it's been haunting me ever since. My school hosted a sleepover night, so I was in the building late, around midnight, with 2 close friends. We'd been outside for a while, but when it got too cold, we headed back in, and that's when we decided to use the bathroom. The school bathrooms have 2 parts, a sink area with mirrors and hand dryers, and then a separate room with stools and urinals. Both areas were fully lit, at least from where I was standing. I walked into the stool room, my friend right behind me, and I went into one of the stalls and closed the door. Instantly, everything went black. The lights cut out and the room fell silent. There were no footsteps, no doors closing, no click of a switch, just sudden, absolute darkness and silence. At first, I thought my friends were pranking me. "Guys, come on," I said, but there was no answer, which made me irritated. They know I'm a believer in the divine. I didn't think they'd mess with me in that way. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pulled the stall door open with my shoulder, trying to confront them. But they weren't there. The room was empty. They hadn't left noiselessly. I hadn't heard anything, they were simply gone. "Guys?" I called out again, but there was nothing. That's when irritation gave way to something. A suffocating, heavy fear. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the small crucifix I always carry. My hand was shaking as I began reciting Psalm 23 aloud. As soon as I finished, the toilet in the stall beside me flushed. No one was in there. I began praying Our Father and heard another flush. Every prayer brought the same response and silence. I stood frozen in the pitch black, my phone's beam throwing the shadow of the crucifix across the tiled wall. Minutes passed until my friends finally came back in. They looked confused and worried, asking where I'd been. They said I'd disappeared for 10 minutes. But here's where things get stranger. Their version of events don't match mine at all. They told me the stall room was already dark when we got there. They said I walked into it alone, one of them even admitting to shutting the door on me as a prank. They thought I was right behind them until they realized I wasn't. That's not what I remember. I saw them with me. I saw the lights on, I heard their footsteps follow mine, I felt them there. And then they were gone. I can't shake how real it felt. But I don't know what to believe. Were my senses wrong? Did something happen to twist my perception? After the flushing timed perfectly with my prayers, no one else was there. Was it a hallucination? A spiritual attack? I've never experienced anything like this before, and I'm struggling to understand it. Has anyone else had something similar happen where your memory doesn't line up with reality? Where silence drops in an instant, and something responds to prayer? I'd really appreciate any insight. My best friend says she saw a tall, skinny black shadow creature run past the window of our downstairs apartment. Right after she saw whatever this thing was, things started happening. When my best friend was in the bathroom, or even when she wasn't around, I would hear the air mattress move, like someone was sitting on it or moving around on it. Faith was walking from the kitchen and looked down the hallway, and there was a tall, black, skinny shadow standing against the door. This morning, Faith and I both heard the air mattress moving again. It did it 3 times, and even my dog Freckles heard it, and stared at the air mattress with her ears perked up. Faith told me she was going to help clean the kitchen while I was shaving, so I said okay. A few seconds later, I saw what looked like her walk in behind me. I turned to look at her, and she wasn't there. I screamed for her, and she walked out the bedroom, where she had gone to put her phone on the charger while she cleaned. Faith said she heard what sounded like a dog barking, but then it turned into human crying. Next, after getting our dogs in, my cat started acting strangely. My husband doesn't get home from work until around 9:30, and my little baby Mel Caramel, started meowing at the door. I called her name and she came to me and I said, "Who are you talking to, honey?" And I heard 2 taps near the door or on the wall behind us. Faith likes to mess with the cats when they meow, especially Salem and Nebby, because they're in heat. She and I were sitting on the couch watching TV. My cat, Momo, was lying on the arm in the couch, and Mel was lying on the coffee table like she always does. We heard what sounded like Nebby meowing in the kitchen, so Faith started meowing back at her like she always does as a joke. We saw that Nebby was on the bookshelf between the kitchen and the living room, and her meowth wasn't moving while we were still hearing the meows. Perhaps it's Salem, Faith suggested, and I looked. Salem was sitting in my gaming chair, which is on the opposite side of the room. Now she's freaked out. Before all this stuff with the tapping and strange noises, Faith and I heard what sounded like a big dog growl outside our window. But my dog Chloe and her maid Teddy were in the pen with her sisters, so it wasn't them. We also heard what sounded like someone grunting in the hallway. Faith was in the bedroom lying down because she was tired and ready to sleep, while I was in the living room on my phone with my male friend. She said she heard what sounded like tapping coming from the bathroom. Not just 1 or 2 taps, but multiple. She said it was like someone trying to get her attention or trying to get her to come in there. Just last night, I heard the same taps, but it was only 2 this time. She said both times she heard the tapping, and she refused to look, too scared she would see something through the crack of the sliding door in our bedroom that leads to the bathroom. I heard tapping coming from behind my husband's computer. My best friend just heard tapping or a sound in the kitchen. Every time I turn around, I keep thinking I see my oldest cat Salem in the dolly black chair, but nothing's there when I turn. I even thought I saw my cat Nebby coming towards me from the kitchen on the floor, but she wasn't there either. So what's going on? This story doesn't actually start with me, but my grandmother on my mother's side called Kathy. And for reference, my mother's name is Nancy. Now, Kathy wasn't exactly Mother of the Year material, if you catch my drift. She found the so-called love of her life and had a daughter with him. But while he was away on deployment, she had an affair. Nancy, my mother, was the result of that affair. When her partner returned and did the math, he left Kathy with 2 daughters. One she loved, and one she despised. I won't go into detail about the abuse Nancy endured from infancy, but I will tell you where the paranormal side of this begins. This part of the story has been confirmed by several people who witnessed it, and I believe it to be true. According to Nancy, my grandmother considered herself a white witch. One day when Nancy was still a baby, she was used in some kind of ritual. I don't know if it was a sacrifice, a vessel, or something else. Kathy had drawn a symbol inside a circle on the floor, surrounded it with red and black candles, and laid Nancy in the center. She was chanting, summoning something. A friend of Kathy's, possibly from Nancy's biological father's side, walked in and saw this happening. Later, when Nancy was a bit older, already traumatized, Kathy suddenly ran out the door one day, found a couple of Mormon missionaries, and told them she wanted to be baptized. She was, and from that moment on, religion became another tool for abuse. Then I was born. I felt like a curse followed my mother. Abused by her own mother, abused again by her second husband. He tried to take her life 3 times. It was as if bad luck were her shadow. I'd had paranormal experiences of my own. When my nana passed, she visited me as a spirit and told me she loved me and would always be there to watch over me. I ran to my mother in tears the next morning, telling her nana had passed away. She didn't believe me, not until the phone rang with the news that I'd already given her. Fast forward to when I was 7. I was standing on my bed looking out my basement window, trying to watch the birds. Suddenly they scattered like something had startled them, and that's when I heard it. A horrifying, evil laugh right beside my ear. There was a wall to my left. My room was empty. My mother was upstairs with my baby brother and I was alone. That sound still chills me to this day. Not long after, I was removed from my mother's custody and placed with Kathy. She made me her next victim. More abuse, more trauma. I learned firsthand what darkness exists in people. But it wasn't just Kathy tormenting me. Strange things started happening. Objects appeared in my room that weren't mine. I was accused of stealing. The motion alarm on my door would go off at night, triggering beatings. I saw things get torn, broken, or thrown. A book once flew at me with no one else around. Lights flickered. Bruises appeared out of nowhere. The activity would worsen or ease, depending on Kathy's mood. Eventually, a kind woman reported Kathy to Child and Family Services, and I was placed in foster care. There, the paranormal events were milder. There was a spirit of a little boy in the barn on the acreage. He left handprints on the ceiling pipes, and I'd see him peeking out of windows. I'd wave, and he'd wave back. Later, I returned to live with my mother, but something had changed. The older she got, the more she seemed like Kathy. Like Kathy's darkness was infecting her. Nancy's abuse was more subtle and harder to prove. Then in 2022, I had one of the worst nightmares in my life. In it, I found a small, circular makeup mirror made of twisted branches with a fake eye beneath the reflective surface. When I looked into it, a demonic eye stared back at me. I dropped the mirror and ran. My stepfather was down the hall asking what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. My voice was gone, my strength drained, and I collapsed to the floor and woke. By that point, I had already left Mormonism at 15 and turned to paganism. I now follow the left-hand path, working with low-vibration entities and trying to use the curse to my advantage. I believe that whatever caused the evil laughter when I was a child had cursed me, but I never let it break me. After the dream, I immediately cleansed myself, used crystals to protect my sleep, and I haven't had a dream like that since. But the activity returned. Just days later, the bathroom lights began flickering. I brushed it off, but the tension in the house exploded. My mother's behavior became more toxic and abusive, and the poltergeist activity surged. Objects vanished, breaking or moving without explanation. My sister, who had just started practicing witchcraft, noticed these changes too. We began trying to figure out how to banish the entity, when one day, my mother made an offhand comment. She said creating a poltergeist was one of her greatest fears, and that same day another book flew at me. Eventually, she found out what we were doing, and she accused me of trying to turn my siblings against her. She banned all witchcraft from the house and claimed I was abusing her with it, and the activity intensified. On the 14th of January 2023, I fled. Not because of the poltergeist, but because I couldn't take the abuse anymore. The activity has since stopped, but I still feel it, the presence Kathy summoned. It waits, lurking, showing up when I'm most vulnerable, when I feel hopeless, when I consider giving up. I can feel it watching and waiting. I don't know its name, but I know it's there. It followed Kathy, then Nancy, and now me. And if my siblings ever have daughters, I fear it will find them too. I want to be rid of it, but I have no idea where to begin. I don't know why I'm thinking of this now, but it was one of the eeriest moments of my life, and I just had to check if anyone had a similar story, or knows if this relates to any folklore. Some friends and I were meeting up to smoke. They were together in a car, and I was waiting for them at a park so they could pick me up. We were meeting in a parking lot at the park. To explain it the best I can, the lot is long and narrow, with a soccer field on either side running parallel to its length. At the far end of the lot, and the soccer fields, is a forest on the outskirts of town. I parked in the very center of the lot under the only streetlight. It was nighttime, and there was heavy rain. My friends pulled up and I hopped out of my car and into theirs, and we started to leave the lot, when we saw someone walking directly towards my car. I mentioned the soccer fields earlier to emphasize how strange this was. This person had walked across half the length of a soccer field, maintaining the exact same diagonal angle the whole way. The best I can describe it is like a bishop moving across a chessboard, staying on one continuous diagonal line. At this point, I told my friend we needed to wait on the street. I genuinely thought someone was about to break into my car. The person reached my car, just a step or two more, and they would have walked right into it. Then without hesitation, they turned, walked along the back of the car, turned again at the end, and walked along the other side, turned once more, went a few steps forward past the front of the car, and finally turned back onto that same diagonal line, continuing off into the woods in the rain. The pace of their walk never changed. It wasn't quite a speed walk, but it wasn't slow either, just very steady and methodical. We always described it as feeling like the monster from It Follows. It was like we happened to witness on its way to a target. Right after that, I had my friends take me back to my car, and we decided to meet at the Walmart parking lot instead. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed tonight's collection of paranormal stories as much as I have. If you did, you can always let me know down below. And if you'd like some exclusive perks, feel free to check out the link to Patreon to find out more. But that's it from me. I hope you all have an amazing night. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.